All right, this is fourth grade, Module 6, Lesson 9, and in this lesson, students are going to be using a place value chart and connecting it with a meter stick, which really is analog for a number line. So they're going to be thinking about the place value chart, they're going to be thinking about a number line, or a tape diagram, or a meter stick, in order to compare the decimals. And the idea of this is we want students to be able to think more, I guess, thoughtfully about how to compare decimals rather than just, a classic thing for teachers to do is to say, well, line up the decimals, fill in the missing spaces with zeros, and just look at your numbers. And so what that does is that while that allows the student to come up with the right answer, it does not teach the student about decimals and the meaning of decimals and the meaning of the place values and all this sort of stuff. It just helps this kid get the answer. And so what this lesson is about is helping students compare decimals, but doing it in a way where students develop an understanding of decimals, not just develop some sort of trick for how to compare decimals. So let's get started on this.
All right, when I'm starting to teach about comparing decimals, the first thing I often do is I'll take these two numbers and I'll say, which decimal is larger, 0.7 or 0.11? And I specifically call this 0.11 because I want to ferret out the students who really don't have an understanding of place value and they just listen for the 0.11 versus the 0.7. And because, of course, as you can imagine, a lot of students will say 0.11 is larger than 0.7. And so that helps me understand that, yes, it is going to be worth my time, at least for this group of students, to go through that concept of that number line and either help them remember it or teach it to them in the first place. So the idea is we're going to locate both of these numbers on the number line. And they both are somewhere between 0 and 1 because they both begin with a 0. And what we want is to remind our students that 0.7 is the same thing as 7/10. So what does that mean? That means we are going to chop this number line into 10 equal-sized pieces. So I'm going to cut it in half and then cut each half into 5 pieces. So there are our 10 intervals. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our 0.7 and we're going to 0.7 and we're going to just move over 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10. So 7/10 is going to go right there. All right, so that's 7/10. So the idea is, so what about 0.11? So we want to think about 0.11, and I'll write it again down here, 0.11 as, we want to think of it as 1/10 plus 1/100th. So we're doing it like a number bond. So 1/10 plus 1/100th. So what does that mean? Well, that means 1/10 is right here. That's 0.1, and of course here's 0.2. So this extra 1/100th that we need to do means, and I'm going to have to zoom in, and I'm going to have to zoom in a lot, that means we need to cut this interval, because here's our 1/10 that we've done. Now we need to add one more 1/100th. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut this interval, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to cut that interval into 10 spaces. Now each of these is considered a 100th. And we want to go one of those spaces. And so this location right there, that location is our, what I had previously called 0.11, but it's really 11/100ths. It's really 1/10 plus 1 extra 100th. So when we zoom out, and now we can compare, so 11/100th really goes right over here. So it's so small, I won't really be able to put it where it needs to go, so I had to draw a little arrow. So the idea is, now which number is bigger, 0.7 or 0.11? And we want students to understand that the decimals further to the right are larger than the numbers on the left, because you can kind of imagine it being like, let's say we were using tape, and 0.7 is this much tape, and I gotta put that back. Okay, there we go. So 0.7 is this much tape. Meanwhile, 0.11 is that much tape. And so you can see that 0.11 is way smaller than 0.7. So that's the idea. 0.7 is way smaller than 0.11. All right. What we're trying to do is avoid teaching students tricks that are kind of like based on alphabetizing or something like that, where we don't really have our students thinking about the meaning of each of the decimal places. And so when we have students placing things on a number line or using tape diagrams, it's really causing our students to think critically about the place value. So here's an example of Eureka Math where they're saying, hey, let's use the tape diagrams in order to identify each of these decimals, and then that's going to allow us, because it kind of shows us the lengths, the relative lengths of these, you can imagine like pieces of tape. It allows us to compare. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this one, and so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6/10 right there. So that starts with 6/10, but then we need to zoom in. So I'm going to zoom in here. And so we started with 6/10, and then this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8/100ths. So what we've got is we've got 6/10 plus we have 8/100ths. So that is 0.68. So that is our value for this one. Now this one's pretty straightforward. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that one's very straightforward. It's just 7/10, 0.7. And what you can do is you can see that 0.7 is just barely larger than 0.68. In fact, it's just larger by 2/100ths, very tiny amount. And then here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that's 0.5, as in 5/10. And then again, right here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's 4/10, but we need to count these little hundredths, so I'm going to zoom in. So we had 4/10, and now we have 1, 2, 3, 4/100ths as well, so that becomes 0.44. 0.44, as in 4/10 plus 4/100ths. All right. So now that we can actually see the relative lengths, so we can compare. But now if we were going to sort these to go from shorter, write a sentence that compares the two lengths. What is it? Express the lengths of the shaded parts in decimal form. Write a sentence that compares the two lengths. What two lengths? Oh, I see. We're supposed to, I see. There's only two of them right here. Duh. Okay, sorry. All right, so there you go. So write a sentence and use the phrase shorter than or longer than. So which one, what do we want to talk about? Well, which one's longer? Well, 7/10 is longer than 0.68 or 68/100. So if we wanted to, we could say 7/10 is shorter than. Now, is longer than. And so if we wanted to, eventually we're going to be using these symbols. So we're going to use the is greater than symbol. And the idea is this side is longer than this side. This is a tiny little short side, and this is a long side. So you can think of it that way. 7/10 is bigger than 0.68. Same thing down here. We have to do some comparing. And this time let's put the 0.44 first. And then what are we going to do? How are we going to compare these two? Well, which one's bigger? Well, 0.5 is bigger than 0.44. And so we want the symbol to go this way. Now I know in other Eureka modules it says think about this as an alligator and all that sort of stuff, but we can also say, hey, these tips is wider than this piece, so that means 0.44 is smaller, because that's the small part, than the bigger part, which is 0.5. All right, that's kind of another mnemonic that we can use. And the last problem for this video is more of the same kind of idea. Is we're going to be comparing these things. And so we've got 0.7, and then we've got 0.62. And the reason I'm writing these down is because I'm going to be asked to sort them. And so then we've got 0.4, and then we've got 0.85, and I'm just ignoring the word liter at this point, and then finally 0.2. And so the first thing we need to do is it says record the volumes over here on your table. So what they want us to do is essentially they're leading us towards that idea of stacking up your decimals, all right? But we want to eventually, use a thoughtful mathematical reason based on understanding. So 0.62, 0.28, 0.4, 0.85, and 0.2. So we now have them all kind of leading us towards that standard technique, or that common technique of just kind of looking at your place values, kind of like alphabetizing, but we don't want to go there yet. We really want to develop that deep understanding of decimals. So we want to compare 0.4 and 0.2. So this is 4/10. This is 2/10. Well, 4 is larger than 2. That means our symbol is going to be that. And then this right here. So that says you have 6/10, and this has 7/10. And this does have two little hundredths, but let's talk about the tenths. Which is bigger, 6/10 or 7/10? Well, 7/10 is larger. So we're going to have this symbol right here. So you get the idea. Now, ultimately, we want to sort, and we're going to sort these from least to greatest. So let's look just the tenths place, and we have a 0.28 and a 0.2. Now, which one is less? Well, this one, 0.28, has 2/10 plus 8/100, while this one just has 2/10. So that means this 0.2 is smaller than 0.28. And now we have to do, okay, what do we have now? We're going from least to greatest. So what's the next one? 0.4. He's alone. There's nothing else with 4/10. So we know that that one comes next. And then let's look for the next smaller tenths. 0.62. So that goes here. And then we're going to look comparing 0.7 and 0.85. Well, 7/10 is less than 8/10. So that means 7/10 is next, and last is 0.85. And that wraps up 4th grade Module 6, Lesson 9. The idea is students are comparing decimals, but they're doing it not from some blindly applied rule, but they're really doing it from a deep understanding of the place value chart and what decimals mean in the first place.